The coffee was ready at 5:30, same as it had been for 41 years. Alma Hawkins moved through the dark kitchen by memory, her hands finding the percolator, the filters, the can of Folgers that she'd been buying from the same grocery store since Johnson was president. The cafe wouldn't open for another hour, but she'd never learned how to sleep past 5. Harold used to say she was part rooster. Harold used to say a lot of things, 3 years now. 3 years since the stroke took him in his sleep, peaceful as breathing out, leaving her alone in the apartment above the cafe they'd built together in 1983. Some mornings, she still reached for him in the dark. Some mornings she forgot, just for a second, that forgetting was all she had left. The Mockingbird Cafe sat on a 2-lane road outside of Harmony, North Carolina, in the rolling Piedmont country, where the mountains started to flatten into farmland. It had been a gas station once, back when Harold bought it with his Army savings, and he'd spent 3 years converting it into something that felt like home. Pine paneling on the walls, red vinyl booths, a counter with 12 stools that had seen 40 years of elbows and coffee cups, and the quiet confessions of strangers passing through. Now the pine paneling was warped in places, the vinyl cracked, the stools down to 9 after she'd had to throw out the ones that wobbled too badly. The health inspector had been by twice in the past year, leaving lists of violations she couldn't afford to fix. The roof leaked when it rained hard. The wiring was older than some of her customers' grandchildren. She should sell. Everyone said so. Her grandson Tyler, her friends at church, the lawyer who'd handled Harold's estate. Sell the building, move into assisted living, let someone else worry about the leaking roof and the cracked vinyl and the coffee that had to be ready at 5:30, because that was when he came. The biker. The silent one. She heard his engine before she saw him, the way she always did, a low rumble that grew until it filled the parking lot, then cut off with the particular finality of a man who'd arrived where he meant to be. She watched through the window as he swung off the Harley, a tall figure in black leather, with gray in his beard and a stillness about him that reminded her of Harold after Korea, the kind of stillness men learned when they'd seen things they couldn't unsay. He'd been coming for 11 months now, every morning, 6 a.m., rain or shine or the bitter cold of a Carolina winter. He'd take the same stool at the end of the counter, the one nearest the door, and she'd pour him coffee without asking. He'd drink it slow, looking out the window at the road, and when he was done, he'd leave a $10 bill under the cup, 5 times what the coffee cost, and walk out without a word. He'd never spoken, not once, not a greeting, not a thank you, not a single syllable. At first she'd thought he was rude. Then she'd noticed the scar on his throat, the ragged line that ran from the ear to collarbone, and she'd understood. "Morning," she said as he settled onto his stool. She poured the coffee, black, and set it in front of him. He nodded. That was their ritual, her greeting, his nod, the coffee, the silence. Some mornings, it felt like the only real conversation she had. Today, though, something was different. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small chalkboard, the kind teachers used to give to children. He'd never brought it before. She watched as he wrote in careful block letters, then turned it toward her. Alma. "Are you okay?" She blinked. He knew her name. Of course he did. It was on the sign outside. But he'd never used it. Never asked her anything. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Why?" He erased the board, wrote again. "You look tired. Different than usual. I'm 78 years old, tired as usual." He studied her for a moment, those dark eyes seeing more than she wanted them to. Then he wrote, "My name is Clarence. People call me Stone. I should have told you before." "Stone?" She tested the word. "That's a hard name." He almost smiled. It changed his whole face, softened it, made him look like someone's father or grandfather instead of a figure from a cautionary tale about motorcycles. "I had throat cancer. Surgery took my voice 2 years ago." He paused, then added, "This is the most I've talked to anyone since." "Why me?" He thought about it. Wrote, "You never asked. You just poured the coffee." She understood that better than she could say. The gift of being left alone with your pain. The kindness of someone who didn't demand you explain it. "My husband was in Korea," she said. "He didn't talk about it for 30 years. Then one night he told me everything. Couldn't stop talking, like a dam breaking." She refilled Stone's cup. He said the silence was louder than the guns. that he'd carried it so long he didn't know how to set it down. Stone nodded slowly. He wrote, "What happened to him? Stroke. 3 years ago next month." She looked at the photograph behind the register, Harold in his army uniform, 22 years old and invincible. Next to it, his Korean War Service medal, the bronze catching the morning light. "I keep thinking I should sell this place. Everyone says I should, but I don't know who I am without it." Stone was quiet for a long moment. Then he wrote, "I used to be a music teacher. Choir director. Voice was my whole life. When I lost it, I didn't know who I was either. How did you figure it out?" "Still working on it. But coming here helps." He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "Felt like I was invisible. Then you saw me." The bell above the door chimed. Alma looked up to see a man in a county uniform, khaki shirt, clipboard, the particular expression of someone who'd come to deliver news nobody wanted to hear. Mrs. Hawkins, Gerald Pruitt, code enforcement. He'd been here before, always with that same clipboard, that same tight smile. "I need to speak with you about some violations." "I'm with a customer." "This won't wait." He set the clipboard on the counter, revealing a stack of forms with red stamps across the top. "I've completed my assessment. The building has 16 code violations, 8 of which are classified as critical. The county is issuing a closure order effective Monday." The words didn't make sense at first. She heard them, but they seemed to come from very far away. "Closure? The roof structure is compromised. The electrical system is a fire hazard. The plumbing doesn't meet current standards." Gerald's voice was flat, rehearsed. "You have 72 hours to vacate or submit a remediation plan with proof of financing." "This cafe has been open for 41 years. Harold built it with his own hands." "Harold's not here anymore, Mrs. Hawkins, and I'm sorry, but sentiment doesn't override safety regulations." He tapped the clipboard. "The documentation is all here. You can appeal, but I'll warn you, the county board meets once a month, and the next meeting isn't until after your deadline." Stone stood up. He was taller than Gerald, broader, and when he moved toward the counter, Gerald took an involuntary step back. "Your customer seems upset," Gerald said. "Maybe you should ask him to leave." Stone picked up his chalkboard and wrote in large, deliberate letters, "Maybe you should leave." Gerald's face reddened. "I'm just doing my job." Stone wrote again, "Your job is harassment? I enforce the code, that's all." But something flickered in Gerald's expression, defensiveness maybe, or the particular guilt of a man who knew his motives weren't as clean as he claimed. 72 hours, Mrs. Hawkins. I suggest you use them wisely." He left. The bell chimed again, and then it was just Alma and Stone and the coffee going cold. 41 years, Alma said quietly. "And it ends like this, some man with a clipboard." Stone sat back down. He wrote, "It doesn't have to end." "You heard him. 72 hours. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have any money." She looked at Harold's photograph, at the medal, at the cafe that had been her whole world. "My grandson keeps calling, Tyler. He works construction in Charlotte. He wants to help, but I keep telling him I'm fine. I've been telling everyone I'm fine for 3 years. Why? Because," she stopped, "because asking for help meant admitting she couldn't do it alone, because doing it alone was the only thing she had left, because Harold had always handled the hard things, and without him, she didn't know how to let anyone else in. Because I'm stubborn," she said finally, "and tired, and maybe a little bit ready to let go." Stone was quiet. Then he wrote, slowly and carefully, "I was ready to let go too. After the surgery, thought there was no point. Then I found this place, found you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, sheet music, old and creased, the edges soft with handling. "The last song I ever sang, my daughter's favorite. I keep it to remember who I was. Where's your daughter now?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "She couldn't watch me lose my voice. Reminded her of her mother. So she left. I'm sorry. Don't be. I understand. Some pain is too big to share." He tucked the sheet music away and picked up his chalk again. "Let me help. I have people, a club. We do things for people who need it." "I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." He wrote one more thing and turned the board toward her. "You saw me when I was invisible. Let me see you now." Alma looked at him, this stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore, this silent man who'd finally found his words. She thought about Harold, about Tyler, about 41 years of coffee and conversation and the small kindnesses that made a life. "Okay," she said. "Okay, but I'm making breakfast first. You can't save the world on an empty stomach." Stone almost smiled again. He wrote, "Yes, ma'am." She went to the kitchen to start the eggs, and behind her, she heard him pull out his phone and begin to type. Help was coming. She just had to learn how to let it in. Stone's club was called the Silent Knights, a name that made more sense once Alma understood who they were. Veterans, mostly. Men and women who'd come back from wars with pieces missing, some visible and some not. They didn't ride for trouble or territory. They rode because the road was the only place some of them felt whole. By noon, 3 of them had arrived at the Mockingbird. A woman named Sargent. She'd actually been one, Stone explained on his chalkboard, Army medic in Afghanistan, and 2 men called Preacher and Dusty. They walked through the cafe with careful eyes, taking pictures, making notes, speaking in the low voices of people who'd assessed damage before. "Roof's bad," Dusty said. He was the youngest, maybe 40, with a prosthetic leg he didn't try to hide. "But not gone. Electrical's the real problem. Some of this wiring looks original." "It is original," Alma said. "Harold did it himself in '83. That was before code required grounded outlets in commercial kitchens, before a lot of things." Dusty shook his head. "Fixing this right would cost 40,000, maybe more." Stone wrote on his board and held it up. How much to fix it enough? Enough to pass inspection, maybe 15, but that's cutting corners, and corners have a way of catching up. Alma sat down heavily in the nearest booth. $15,000. She had maybe 2,000 in savings, another 800 in the register. The rest was tied up in a building that might be worthless by Monday. "There's something else." Sargent had been quiet, scrolling through her phone. Now she looked up with an expression Alma couldn't read. "Gerald Pruitt, the code enforcement guy. I did some digging." "And?" "His brother-in-law is Warren Cross Development. They've been buying up properties along this corridor for the past 2 years. She turned the phone around, showing a map dotted with red markers. Every building they've acquired had code violations. Everyone was purchased below market value after the owners couldn't afford repairs. Stone's face went hard. He wrote, "They're targeting her." "Looks that way. Pruitt finds the violations, Cross swoops in with a lowball offer. Legal, technically, but dirty." Alma thought about Gerald's face when he delivered the news, that flicker of something beneath the professional mask. Not guilt, exactly. Something more like appetite. "He's done this before," she said. It wasn't a question. "At least 6 times that I can find. Small businesses, elderly owners, people who don't have the resources to fight back." Sargent set down her phone. "The good news is, patterns like this attract attention. If we can prove coordination between Pruitt and Cross, that takes time. We have 72 hours. Then we work fast." The phone rang. Alma answered it the way she'd answered it for 41 years. Mockingbird Cafe. "Grandma." Tyler's voice tight with worry. "I just heard. Someone from your church called Mom, and Mom called me. What's going on?" "Nothing I can't handle." "That's not what I heard. They're shutting you down?" "They're trying." "I'm coming. I can be there by tonight." "Tyler, you have work. You have Lisa and the baby. You can't just drop everything." "Watch me." There was steel in his voice, the same steel Harold used to have when he'd made up his mind about something. "I've been waiting 3 years for you to let me help. You keep saying you're fine, and you're not fine, Grandma. You haven't been fine since Grandpa died." The words hit harder than she expected. She sat down, suddenly exhausted. "I know," she said quietly. "I know I'm not fine. I didn't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. You're my grandmother. You taught me how to make biscuits, and how to change a tire, and how to treat people right. If I can't help you when you need it, what was the point of any of that?" She didn't have an answer. Through the window, she could see Stone and the others conferring in the parking lot, their heads bent together over something on Dusty's phone. "Okay," she said. "Come, but don't speed. Lisa will kill me if you get a ticket." "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, baby." She hung up and sat in the empty cafe, listening to the silence. Harold's photograph watched her from behind the register. She wondered what he'd say about all this. The bikers, the code violations, the grandson driving 4 hours because she'd finally admitted she wasn't okay. He'd probably say it was about damn time. That evening, Warren Cross came to call. He drove a Mercedes that cost more than Alma's building was worth, and he wore a suit that probably cost more than her car. He was 60-ish, silver-haired, with the smooth smile of a man who'd learned that charm was cheaper than honesty. "Mrs. Hawkins." He extended his hand. She didn't take it. "I heard about your situation. I wanted to see if I could help." "Help how?" "I'm a developer. I buy properties, renovate them, give them new life." He looked around the cafe with an expression of calculated sympathy. "This place has good bones. With the right investment, it could be something special again." "It's already special." "Of course. I didn't mean—" He smiled, regrouping. "Let me be direct. The county is shutting you down on Monday. You don't have the money to fix the violations. I do. I'm prepared to offer you $40,000 for the building, as is today. That's more than fair market value, given the condition. And what would you do with it? Renovate, update, probably keep it as a restaurant. There's a market for nostalgic roadside dining." His smile widened. "You could even stay on as a consultant. Help maintain the character." "A consultant?" Alma let the words sit in the air. "In my own cafe. I understand the attachment, but Mrs. Hawkins, you're 78 years old. How many more years do you realistically have in you? Wouldn't it be better to take the money, enjoy your retirement, let someone else worry about roof repairs and electrical codes?" Stone appeared in the doorway. He'd been outside when Cross arrived, and now he stood with his arms folded, blocking the exit without saying a word. His chalkboard hung at his side. Cross glanced at him, then back at Alma. "Friend of yours?" "Customer." "Interesting-looking customer." Cross's smile didn't waver, but something behind his eyes had sharpened. "I didn't realize the Mockingbird was a biker bar." "It's not a bar, it's a cafe, and the only thing we serve is coffee and kindness." "How poetic." Cross pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the counter. "Think about my offer, Mrs. Hawkins. $40,000 is generous. After Monday, it might be considerably less." He walked toward the door. Stone didn't move. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Cross was taller, smoother, more polished. Stone was none of those things, but there was something in his stillness that made Cross look away first. "Excuse me," Cross said. Stone stepped aside. As Cross passed, Stone wrote something on his chalkboard and held it up so only Cross could see it. Whatever it said made the developer's face go pale. "Have a nice evening," Cross said, and left faster than he'd arrived. Alma looked at Stone. "What did you write?" He turned the board around. It read, "I know about Pruitt." "Do you? Know about him, I mean." Sargent found the connection, emails, county records. "Pruitt's been steering properties to Cross for years." "Can you prove it?" "Working on it. Need time. Time's the one thing we don't have." Stone erased the board and wrote something new. "Your grandson, he's coming?" "Tonight." "Good. We need someone who can work fast." "Dusty says the electrical is the priority." "Tyler's. Done electrical. He rewired his whole house last year." Stone nodded. He looked tired, Alma realized, the kind of tired that lived in the bones. "When did you last sleep?" she asked. He shrugged. Wrote, "Sleep is hard, too quiet." "I know what you mean. After Harold died, the silence kept me up for months. I started talking to him just to fill it. Still do sometimes." "Does he answer?" "In his way." She looked at the photograph. "I hear his voice in my head, telling me I'm being stubborn, telling me to let people help." Stone was quiet for a moment. Then, "My wife died 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer. I still hear her too. Is that why your daughter left? Losing both of you was too much?" "Not both. Just me." He paused, then added, "She lost her mother first. Then I lost my voice, and she said it was like watching me die, too. She couldn't do it twice." "Have you talked to her? Since—" Stone shook his head, but he pulled out his phone, showing a text thread with no messages sent. "I type things, then delete them, don't know what to say. Maybe start with the truth, that you miss her, that you understand why she left. What if she doesn't answer? Then at least you tried. That's more than most people manage." Stone looked at the phone for a long moment. Then he tucked it away and wrote, "First we save your cafe, then I'll think about it. Deal." Tyler arrived at 9, his pickup truck loaded with tools and a look on his face that reminded Alma so much of Harold it made her chest ache. He hugged her for a long time, not saying anything, just holding on. "I'm here," he said finally. "Whatever you need, I'm here." She introduced him to Stone, to the Silent Nights, to the plan that was still taking shape. Tyler listened, asked questions, started making lists. By midnight, he and Dusty were in the basement, mapping the electrical system by flashlight. Alma sat in Harold's booth and watched them work. Stone sat across from her, his chalkboard resting on the table. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this." He wrote, "Thank me on Monday, when the doors are still open." And if they're not? Then he wrote something that made her throat tighten. "Then we tried, and trying matters. You taught me that." She didn't trust herself to speak, so she just reached across the table and squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back, and they sat together in the silence that didn't feel so empty anymore. Saturday passed in a blur of sawdust and sweat. Tyler worked through the night, rewiring the kitchen with Dusty guiding him through the code requirements. Preacher turned out to have been a roofer before his second tour in Iraq, and he spent the morning up a ladder with a nail gun, patching the worst of the leaks. Sergeant coordinated, made runs to the hardware store in her pickup, and kept digging through county records on her laptop between trips. More riders arrived as word spread. By noon, there were 15 bikes in the parking lot and 20 people working on the cafe, some from the Silent Nights, others from clubs Alma had never heard of who'd gotten the call and come anyway. They moved through the building like a strange kind of army, fixing things Harold had let slide, repairing damage she'd stopped seeing years ago. Alma tried to help, but they kept steering her toward the kitchen. "Cook," Sergeant said. "That's your job. Keep these people fed." So she cooked. Eggs and bacon for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, a pot of chili that she stretched with extra beans when the crowd kept growing. The cafe hadn't been this full since Harold's wake. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Stone worked alongside the others, doing whatever needed doing. He couldn't call out instructions or ask for tools, but he'd developed a system with the chalkboard, shorthand codes the other knights understood, quick messages that kept the work flowing. Watching him move through the chaos, Alma realized this was who he'd been before the cancer, a leader, someone people followed. By Saturday evening, the electrical was up to code, the roof was patched, the plumbing had been repaired where it needed to be, and a fresh coat of paint covered the water stains on the ceiling. Tyler stood in the middle of the dining room, covered in dust and grinning. "We might actually pull this off," he said. Then the phone rang. Alma answered. The voice on the other end made her stomach drop. "Mrs. Hawkins, this is Gerald Pruitt. I'm calling to inform you that based on new information, the county has accelerated your deadline. You have until tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to present a remediation plan. If the building doesn't pass inspection by noon, the closure order stands." "You can't do that. You said Monday." "Circumstances have changed. I received a report of active construction without permits. That's a separate violation, Mrs. Hawkins, one that could result in criminal charges." She looked at Tyler, at the tools scattered across the floor, at all the work they'd done without once thinking about permits. "This is harassment. This is the law. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Have a good evening." The line went dead. Alma set down the phone and told the others what Pruitt had said. The room went quiet. Stone's face darkened, and he wrote on his board with quick, angry strokes, "He's trying to bury us." "Can he do that?" Tyler asked. "Change the deadline like that?" "If he's got the county behind him, he can do whatever he wants." Sergeant was already on her phone, scrolling. "The permit issue is real. Everything we've done today is technically illegal without the right paperwork." "Then we get the paperwork." "It's Saturday night. The permit office doesn't open until Monday." The weight of it settled over them like a physical thing. All this work, all these people, and it might not matter. "I'll talk to him." Alma's voice surprised her with its steadiness. "Pruitt, tomorrow morning. I'll ask him what it would take to make this go away." "You know what
"It would take," Sergeant said. "He wants you to sell to Cross." "Then maybe I should."
"Grandma, no. Tyler." She held up her hand. "I've watched you all work yourselves to the bone for 2 days. For what? A building that's falling apart? A business that barely breaks even?" She looked around the cafe, at the fresh paint, the new wiring, the faces of people who'd given their time for nothing.
Maybe it's time to let go. Maybe Harold would understand. Stone stood up. He walked to the wall behind the register where Harold's photograph hung next to his Korean War medal. He stood there for a long moment, then wrote something on his board and held it up for everyone to see. What would Harold say? Alma looked at the photograph. Harold at 22, young and certain, before Korea broke something in him that never fully healed. He'd spent his whole life building things, this cafe, their marriage, a family that stretched across generations. He'd never quit anything in his life. He'd say I was being a damn fool, she admitted. He'd say you don't give up just because giving up is easier. Then don't. It's not that simple. Stone erased the board and wrote again. It is that simple. It's just not easy. Sargent's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and something in her expression shifted. I've got something, she said. The emails between Pruitt and Cross. I've been trying to get copies, but they're on county servers, and I couldn't access them. But Cross's assistant just quit last week. I tracked her down online, asked if she'd talk. She held up her phone. She's willing to testify. She says she has copies of everything. Emails, memos, payment records. Pruitt's been taking kickbacks for years. That doesn't help us by 8 a.m. tomorrow. No, but it might help us by noon. Sargent was typing rapidly. If I can get her statement on record, get it to the county commissioner before the inspection. The commissioner is Ed Walsh. He plays golf with Cross every Sunday. Then we go over his head. State level. The Attorney General's office has a corruption hotline. Tyler shook his head. That takes time. Investigations, reviews. It could be months before anything happens. Unless we make noise, loud enough noise that they can't ignore it. Stone was writing again. He turned the board around. How many writers can we get here by morning? Sargent looked at him. How many do you want? As many as it takes. The calls went out. Stone typed messages to every club contact he had while Sargent worked the phones. Preacher got on social media, posting to groups and pages, spreading the word. Mockingbird Cafe, 8 a.m., Sunday, be there. Alma watched them work and felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope, small and fragile, but real. There's something I have to do, Stone wrote, showing her the board. I'll be back before morning. Where are you going? He hesitated. Then, to make a call I should have made a long time ago. He walked, outside, pulling out his phone. Through the window, Alma watched him stand by his bike, staring at the screen for a long moment. Then his thumbs started moving, typing a message to someone far away. She didn't know what he was saying, but she recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he stood like a man stepping off a cliff. Tyler came to stand beside her. You okay, Grandma? I don't know. Ask me tomorrow. Whatever happens, I'm glad I came. I should have been here a long time ago. You're here now. That's what matters. He put his arm around her and she leaned into him, and they watched Stone finish his message and tuck the phone away. He turned back toward the cafe, and Alma saw something different in his face. Not hope, exactly, but something close to it. The night stretched ahead of them, full of work and worry and the particular tension of waiting for something to break. But they weren't waiting alone. At 3 a.m., Alma finally lay down on the cot Tyler had set up in the storeroom. She didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion pulled her under almost immediately. She dreamed of Harold. He was young again, wearing his army uniform, standing in the cafe the day they'd opened. You stubborn woman, he said, but he was smiling. I told you to let people help. I'm trying, she said. I know. I'm proud of you. She woke at 5 to the sound of engines. At first she thought she was still dreaming, but the rumble kept building, growing louder and louder, until it filled the world. She stumbled to the window and looked out. The parking lot was full. The road was full. Motorcycles stretched as far as she could see in the gray pre-dawn light. Hundreds of them, riders still arriving, headlights cutting through the darkness like a river of stars. Stone was standing on the porch, watching them come. He turned and saw her at the window, and he held up his chalkboard. They came. Alma's hand went to her mouth. She couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. Outside, the engines kept coming, and the sun began to rise, and everything was about to change. By 7 a.m., there were over 200 motorcycles lining the road outside the Mockingbird Cafe. They'd come from across the state and beyond, silent knights from a dozen chapters,
Other clubs who'd heard the call, independent writers who'd seen the social media posts and decided to show up. They filled the parking lot, spilled onto the highway shoulder, lined up along the fence of the neighboring property until the whole stretch of road looked like a rally for something nobody could quite name. Alma stood on the porch, wearing her best dress, the blue one she'd worn to Harold's funeral, and watched them arrive. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't make them stop. Stone appeared beside her with his chalkboard. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know. I've never seen anything like this." "Neither have I." He paused, then added, "My daughter texted back." "What did she say?" "She said she's been waiting 3 years for me to reach out. She said she's sorry she left." He looked at the board, at his own words, like he couldn't quite believe them. "She's driving down from Raleigh, should be here by noon." Alma squeezed his arm. "I'm glad." "Me too." At 7:30, a county vehicle pulled into the lot. Gerald Pruitt stepped out, his face cycling through confusion, alarm, and something that looked like fear as he took in the crowd. He straightened his clipboard like a shield and walked toward the porch. "Mrs. Hawkins, I see you've gathered some, supporters." "Friends," she corrected. "They're called friends. This doesn't change anything. The inspection will proceed at 8. If the violations haven't been addressed, they have been." Tyler stepped forward, holding a folder. "Every critical violation on your list. Electrical, plumbing, roof structure. I've documented everything. Photos, receipts, specifications. It's all up to code." Pruitt took the folder but didn't open it. "You didn't have permits for this work?" "We're applying for retroactive permits Monday morning. The county allows that for emergency repairs." "I'll be the judge of what qualifies as emergency repairs." "No." A new voice, firm and female. Sargent walked up from the parking lot, her phone in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. "Actually, you won't." Pruitt's face went pale. "Who are you?" "Someone who spent the last 48 hours learning everything about you." She handed him the papers. "Emails between you and Warren Cross dating back 4 years. Payment records showing deposits to an offshore account in your wife's maiden name. A sworn statement from Cross's former assistant detailing how you've been steering distressed properties to his company in exchange for kickbacks." Pruitt didn't move. The papers hung in the air between them. "I've already sent copies to the state attorney general's office," Sargent continued. "They're very interested. Something about a pattern of corruption in county government." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to conduct a fair inspection of this building. You're going to evaluate the repairs that have been made, and if they meet code, which they do, you're going to sign off on them. Or you can refuse, and I can make a call that ends your career before lunch." The silence stretched. 200 riders watched from the road, their engines quiet, their presence loud. Pruitt looked at the papers, at the crowd, at Alma standing on the porch of the cafe he'd tried to take from her. "I was just doing my job," he said quietly. "No, you were doing Warren Cross's job." Alma's voice was steady, stronger than she'd expected. "There's a difference." Pruitt's shoulders sagged. Something in him seemed to collapse, not dramatically, but the way a man does when he realizes the game is over and he's lost. "Fine," he said. "Let's do the inspection." He walked through the cafe with Tyler at his side, checking every repair against his clipboard. The work was good. Alma could see it in his face, the grudging acknowledgement that there was nothing to cite, nothing to condemn. When they reached the kitchen, he stood for a long moment, looking at the new wiring, the patched ceiling, the fresh paint. "Your husband did the original work?" he asked. "In 1983, right after he bought the place. It lasted 40 years. That's not nothing." He made a final note on his clipboard. "The repairs meet code. I'm lifting the closure order." The words took a moment to land. Then Tyler let out a whoop that could be heard outside, and the crowd erupted. Engines starting, horns honking, a roar that shook the windows. Pruitt walked toward the door, then stopped. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around, "I'm sorry. I got in over my head with Cross years ago, and I didn't know how to get out. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth." "What are you going to do now?" Alma asked. "Turn myself in, probably. It's coming anyway. Might as well get ahead of it." He finally looked at her. "Your husband was a lucky man, having someone who'd fight this hard for something he built." "I'm the lucky one. I had 41 years with him." Pruitt nodded once and walked out. Through the window, Alma watched him drive away, his county vehicle disappearing down the road toward whatever came next. Warren Cross arrived 30 minutes later. He pulled into the lot in his Mercedes, looked at the sea of motorcycles, and for a moment seemed to consider driving away. But something, pride maybe, or the inability to admit defeat, made him get out and walk toward the cafe. Stone intercepted him at the edge of the parking lot. Cross stopped, that smooth smile faltering as he faced the silent man who'd stared him down 2 days before. "I heard about Gerald," Cross said. "I want you to know I had nothing to do with—" Stone held up his chalkboard. It read, "We have the emails." Cross's smile died. "I see. This is over. Leave her alone." "And if I don't?" Stone erased the board and wrote something new. He held it up so only Cross could see. Whatever it said made the developer take a step back, his face draining of color. "You wouldn't." Stone just looked at him, patient, implacable, the stillness of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Cross turned and walked back to his car. He didn't look back. The Mercedes pulled out of the lot and drove west toward Charlotte, toward a future that no longer included the Mockingbird Cafe. "What did you write?" Alma asked when Stone returned to the porch. He showed her the board. It read, "I know where your mother lives. She goes to church on Sunday." Alma stared at him. "You wouldn't really—" "His mother is 82, attends First Baptist in Winston-Salem. I would never hurt her." He almost smiled, but he doesn't know that. Despite everything, Alma laughed. It came out rough, more sob than sound, but it was real. The morning became a celebration. Riders who'd come to protest stayed to eat, filling every booth and stool, spilling out onto the porch and the parking lot. Alma cooked until she ran out of food, then sent Tyler to the grocery store for more. Preacher manned the coffee pot. Sergeant took over the register. Even Dusty, with his prosthetic leg, helped bust tables. At noon, a car pulled into the lot. Not a motorcycle, just an ordinary sedan. A woman got out, mid-30s, with Stone's eyes and a nervous expression. Stone went still. He set down the plate he was carrying and walked outside, slowly, like a man approaching something he was afraid might disappear. Alma watched through the window as father and daughter stood face to face for the first time in 3 years. The woman, Rachel, she remembered from what Stone had told her, was crying. Stone wasn't, but his hands were shaking as he reached out and pulled her into his arms. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, not speaking. They didn't need to. Tyler appeared at Alma's elbow. "Who's that?" "His daughter. They've been estranged since he lost his voice." "Looks like they're not anymore." "No, looks like they're not." Stone led Rachel inside, his arm around her shoulders. He introduced her to Alma with his chalkboard. "My daughter." She came. "I'm glad to meet you," Alma said. "Your father's been a good friend to me." Rachel wiped her eyes. "He wrote me about you, about this place. He said you taught him that silence doesn't have to mean being alone." Alma looked at Stone, at the man who'd walked into her cafe 11 months ago and sat without speaking, morning after morning, until the silence between them became its own kind of conversation. "He taught me the same thing," she said. The celebration continued into the afternoon. Someone brought out a guitar, and one of the riders turned out to have a voice like honey. He sang old songs, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, the music Harold used to play on the jukebox before it broke, and they couldn't afford to fix it. Alma sat in Harold's booth, watching her cafe come alive in a way it hadn't in years. Stone sat across from her, Rachel beside him, their hands intertwined on the table. "Thank you," Alma said, "for everything." Stone wrote, "Thank you for the coffee." "That's all it took? Coffee?" "No." He paused, thinking. "It took someone who saw me, who didn't look away. I never could look away from someone in pain. Harold used to say it was my worst quality." Stone shook his head. He wrote, "Best quality." The world needs more people who don't look away. Outside, the engines were starting again. Riders heading home, back to their lives, carrying stories they'd tell for years about the old woman and the cafe and the morning they'd shown up because someone asked them to. Alma watched them go, one by one, until only the silent nights remained. "Will you come back?" she asked Stone. "Tomorrow morning?" He smiled, a real smile, the first one she'd seen that reached his eyes. "Of course. Someone has to drink your coffee. 6 a.m. Sharp. I'll be there. He walked outside with Rachel, his arm still around her shoulders. Alma watched them go, then turned back to the empty cafe, to the photographs behind the register, to the life she'd almost lost and somehow, impossibly, kept. "We did it, Harold," she said quietly. "We're still here." The photograph didn't answer, but she could have sworn he was smiling. 6 months later, the Mockingbird Cafe had a new sign. Tyler had made it himself, hand-carved from reclaimed pine, the letters painted in the same red Harold had used in 1983. Mockingbird Cafe, EST, 1983, rebuilding since 2024. It hung above the door, catching the October light, a promise kept in wood and paint. The repairs had held, more than held. With the money that came in after the story went viral, they'd done more than patch. New booths, new stools, a kitchen that would pass inspection for another 40 years. The jukebox worked again, stocked with Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson and all the songs Harold used to love. Some nights, Alma played them just to hear his voice in her head, singing along off-key the way he always had. Tyler had moved back to Harmony. He'd found work with a contractor in Burlington, close enough to help at the cafe on weekends, close enough to have dinner with his grandmother twice a week. Lisa and the baby came too, a little girl named Harper, who had her great-grandfather's stubborn chin and her great-grandmother's eyes. "She's going to be a handful," Tyler said, watching Harper grab at the sugar packets on the table. "She's going to be perfect," Alma corrected, "just like her daddy was." Stone still came every morning at 6, but he didn't come alone anymore. Rachel had taken a job at a hospital in Greensboro, 90 minutes away. She drove up every weekend, staying in the apartment above a barbershop that Alma had helped her find. Father and daughter were learning each other again, slowly, the way you learn anything that matters. With patience, with mistakes, with the willingness to keep trying when it would be easier to stop. Some mornings, Rachel came to the cafe too. She'd sit beside her father at the counter, drinking coffee, not talking much. The silence between them was different now, comfortable, the kind of quiet that held things instead of hiding them. Stone had started writing again, not on his chalkboard, but in a notebook Alma had given him. Stories, memories, the songs he used to sing before the cancer took his voice. He'd shown some of them to Rachel. She'd cried. He'd cried too, though he'd tried to hide it. "I found the sheet music," Rachel told Alma one Saturday morning while Stone was in the bathroom. "The song he kept in his jacket, Mom's favorite. He showed me once, said it was the last thing he ever sang. I didn't know he still had it, all these years carrying it with him." Rachel's voice was thick. "I thought when he lost..." His voice, he'd lost everything that mattered. But he didn't. He was just waiting for someone to help him find it again. Sometimes that's all any of us need, someone to wait with. Gerald Pruitt had pleaded guilty to 3 counts of corruption in August. The sentence was 2 years, suspended, with community service and restitution. Alma had watched the news coverage without satisfaction. He'd done wrong, but he'd also admitted it, and there was something in that worth acknowledging. People were more complicated than the worst thing they'd done. Warren Cross had left the state. His company had folded after the investigation went public, the investors scattering like birds from a gunshot. Alma didn't know where he'd gone. She didn't much care. Some stories didn't need endings, just distance. The Silent Nights had made the Mockingbird a regular stop on their charity runs. Once a month, they'd roll in, 15, 20 bikes, and fill the cafe with noise and laughter and the particular warmth of people who'd found each other in the dark places. Alma cooked for them like they were family. By now, they were. Harold's photograph still hung behind the register next to his Korean War medal. But there were new photographs beside it now. The morning the riders came, 200 bikes filling the road, Stone and Rachel reunited, holding each other in the parking lot, Tyler and Lisa and Harper, 3 generations continuing what 2 had started. Alma looked at them every morning while the coffee percolated, proof that life kept going, even when you thought it couldn't. Especially then. On a cool morning in late October, exactly 1 year since Stone had first walked through her door, Alma came downstairs to find him already waiting on the porch. It was earlier than usual, not yet 6, and the sky was still purple with the last of the night. "You're early," she said. He held up his chalkboard. Couldn't sleep, too excited. "Excited about what?" He erased the board and wrote something new. Rachel is moving back. She got a job at the hospital in Burlington, 30 minutes away. Alma felt her heart lift. Stone, that's wonderful. I know. He paused, then added, I thought I'd lost her forever. But she came back. People do that sometimes. Come back. They do, when there's something worth coming back to. Stone looked at the cafe, at the new sign, at the light starting to glow in the kitchen window. He wrote, This place, it gave me that. Something worth coming back to. You gave it right back. You and all the others. Alma unlocked the door and held it open. Now come inside before you freeze. Coffee's almost ready. They took their usual places, Alma behind the counter, Stone on his stool by the door. The percolator hissed and bubbled the way it had for 41 years. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the road gold. Stone pulled out the sheet music he always carried, his wife's favorite song, the last one he'd ever sung, and set it on the
counter. He wrote, Rachel asked me to teach her the words. She wants to sing it for me on her mother's birthday. That's beautiful. I can't sing anymore, but she can. And that's enough. Alma poured his coffee, black, the way he'd always taken it. She poured one for herself too, and they sat together in the quiet, watching the light change, listening to the silence that didn't feel empty anymore. Harold would have liked you, she said. He always said the best people were the ones who showed up without being asked. Stone nodded. He wrote one last thing on his board and turned it toward her. I like to think he sent me. Alma smiled. She looked at Harold's photograph, at the medal, at the cafe he'd built with his own hands that she'd almost lost and somehow kept. Yeah, she said, I like to think so too. Outside, a single motorcycle rumbled past on the highway, heading somewhere, carrying someone toward whatever came next. The sound faded. The coffee steamed, and the Mockingbird Cafe opened for another day. Sometimes the quietest people speak the loudest truths, and sometimes all it takes to be seen is someone willing to look. If this story moved you, subscribe so you never miss one. And tell us, who's the person who showed up for you without being asked?